A series of explosions that killed hundreds of civilians and destroyed everything in the immediate vicinity of the Texas port is marked as a black day in U.S. history. Yes, we are talking about the Texas City disaster of 1947, one of the worst industrial accidents America has ever experienced. Let's look deep through the timeline to know what happened in the tragic true story of the Texas City disaster. The explosion was so huge that a seismologist in Denver, Colorado, recording the shockwaves from the explosion in Texas City, believed that an atomic bomb had been detonated. Even Strategic Air Command in Omaha, Nebraska believed a nuclear attack had occurred. Even though ammonium nitrate was a fertilizer, it was used as an explosive during World War II. Only 2.5 tons of ammonium nitrate were used in the bombing of Oklahoma City in 1995, and we know what damage it did. In the Texas City disaster, 2,500 tons of ammonium nitrate were consumed during the explosion. Now, imagine the scale of explosions and the amount of devastation it might have made to Texas City. Although ammonium nitrate fertilizer is typically a relatively safe item to transport under certain circumstances, it can become unstable and explosive when a large quantity is exposed to intense heat. Therefore, ammonium nitrate is also utilized as a military explosive and fertilizer. The SS Grand Camp, a French cargo ship, departed New York City, New York around Christmas time in 1946. The Grand Camp sailed along the North American coast to Newport News, Virginia, loaded with merchandise, then hovered over the North Atlantic to France and Belgium. It then turned around and returned to Venezuela by way of the Atlantic. It stopped in Havana, Cuba, then continued to Texas City, Texas, where it would pick up its last cargo. The Grand Camp was already loaded with a cargo of twine, peanuts, tobacco, and small arms ammunition when it arrived at Texas City in April 1947. The hundreds of tons of ammonium nitrate fertilizer were scheduled to be delivered to European farmers. On April 11th, the Grand Camp landed in Texas City. Longshoremen allegedly noticed that the bags of fertilizer were warm during the loading process, indicating that the fertilizer's chemical activity was increasing. The Grand Camp was docked at Texas City for a few days. The fertilizer was loaded aboard the cargo ship, which was slowed considerably by severe rains. Around 8 a.m. on April 16, 1947, employees came out to continue loading. Roughly 2,300 tons of ammonium nitrate had previously been placed into the holds of the ships. Workers smelled smoke as soon as they entered the hold. Others soon caught wind of smoky fumes. They could see the flames around 10 to 15 feet below where they removed a couple of fertilizer bags. First, workers unsuccessfully attempted to extinguish the fire using water bottles and a fire extinguisher. Around 8:25 a.m., the fire department received a call, but by the time 2 fire trucks arrived, the fire had already begun to burn up so fast that water was unlikely to douse it. To avoid an explosion, workers had also removed the small weapons and ammunition from the ship. However, only 3 of 16 crates were removed from the hold when the crew was told to leave the ship. The ship's captain ordered the crew to cover the hatches with tarpaulins while steam was being pushed inside. This was an attempt to extinguish a fire, but sadly, it made things worse. The steam added to flare up the fire and make things worse. The hold's temperature increased until it reached about 850 degrees Fahrenheit, the point at which ammonium nitrate explodes. Additionally, gasoline dripped onto the fertilizer bags which fed the fire. The ship exploded about 9 a.m., sending the cargo up to 3,000 feet in the air around an hour after workers first spotted the smoke. The explosion could be heard up to 150 miles away and felt as far as 250 miles from the site. The explosion's intensity was so great that it even took down small airplanes in range. The explosion also brought about a 15-foot tidal surge that swamped the vicinity. Most of the neighboring structures were destroyed, and many houses had roofs and doors severely blown off by the explosion. The falling debris caused hundreds of structures to catch fire. A Monsanto Chemical Company facility was destroyed about 300 feet away from the explosion site. Jewel Turner, an eyewitness of the incident who was 19 at the time of the explosion, remembered the fierce, colorful flames due to the explosion. Ammonium nitrate was also carried onto the SS High Flyer, anchored close to the Grand Camp. It was also laden with 2,000 tons of sulfur and 1,000 tons of ammonium nitrate. It was a more dangerous combination than that of the Grand Camp. Ammonium nitrate became more flammable when coupled with sulfur. The High Flyer initially suffered little damage from the explosion and began to drift. However, the captain gave the order to lift the anchor so he could maneuver the ship away from the region out of fear of another explosion. The ship was getting closer and closer to the burning ruins of the Grand Camp, but the crew could not raise the anchor. After about an hour of attempting to increase the anchor, the staff gave up and abandoned the High Flyer. About 15 to 16 hours after the first explosion, around 1:10 a.m., the High Flyer caught fire and exploded. This explosion was broadcast live on TV. According to witnesses, it was much more potent than the Grand Camp. Steel shards arced high into the night sky and dropped in a broad radius, sparking countless flames. These fires moved to the neighboring crude oil tanks, which erupted in flames and caused the fire to spread. The black columns of smoke could be seen up to 30 miles distant when the sun rose. The flames blazed for many days until they either went out on their own or were put out by the few surviving firemen. It is estimated that 1.5 million barrels of petroleum worth $500 million were destroyed. The modern-day value of these barrels would be around $6.6 billion. The blast also blew apart oil storage facilities in Texas City, leaving an oily coating all over the surrounding city of Galveston, which was 10 miles away. According to residents of Galveston, it felt like a cloud was pouring tar, oil, and soot on them. This dark cloud obscured the sky over Galveston for roughly 30 minutes. There weren't many homes in Texas City left standing after the devastation. The only building in the vicinity to survive the bomb was John Thames' house, which was barely a couple of miles from the docks. More than 500 homes were demolished. Almost 90% of residential dwellings had mild to severe damage affecting more than 2,000 people. As a result, pretty much the whole town was left homeless. Although the commercial buildings fared slightly better than the residential ones, up to 10% were found dangerous following the explosions. Over $100 million worth of property was devastated by the explosion, which would be worth around $500 million in modern times. The official government account estimated the deaths of that 500 people. But according to the locals, it is estimated that hundreds more people might have been burnt alive in the explosion, which included visiting sailors, non-census workers, their families, and travelers. Around 143 workers were alone from the Monsanto chemical facility among the civilian fatalities. Help from dentistry school students was requested to help with the identification of victims using their dental records. The Texas City explosion was the worst industrial disaster the United States has ever seen in terms of size and casualties. Thanks for watching the video. If you like the video, check out other historical videos on our channel. Don't forget to click the bell icon so you don't miss out on such interesting topics.